Unfortunately for you, it is Jim, and I am genuinely shocked to see this. Once it hits March 24th, 2018, it will have been 3 years since Bloodborne first came out. Up to this point, the game has been patched several times, the Old Hunters DLC has been released, and so much more has been discovered about how the game works. Yet in Ouroboros' original video, he states that
I made this video specifically for people who like to have an optimized build from day one, don't want to fuck up their stats on their first playthrough.
Now I know the video itself came out a day before Bloodborne was released, so Ouroboros was more than likely running on pre-game knowledge. Nonetheless, it's been 3 years and no one has thought to want to try and update this? No one? Really? Okay. Bloodborne is free for PlayStation Plus. That means so many people, so many new people are trying to play this game right now. If this is your first step into Bloodborne, the very first time you're playing this game, I honestly believe that you shouldn't have to worry all that much about getting the perfect build straight off the bat. Experience the game at your own pace and discover what everyone has been praising about for so long. Regardless, for new players and returning veterans alike, I think it is high time that we get one big retrospective build guide. Not just a weapon review or showcase. Those are great videos, don't get me wrong, but damn it, there's something missing here. We have to set the record straight. I come to you today with a genuine overview of all the possibilities that are at your fingertips when you pick up this game. Now you may have a lot of questions in mind like, what do these stats mean? How do I get the most out of my weapons? Or how do I make my builds as efficient as possible? We are going to try and answer some of those questions you may have today. At the very least, new players ought to know what these 6 stats do. And returning players as well, y'all might need a refresher. Perhaps learn a little extra something you didn't already know. So without any further ado, let's Philip DeFranco right into it.
You beautiful bastards.
There is vitality, endurance, strength, skill, blood tinge, and arcane. From a glance, there are 2 passive stats and 4 offensive stats. The passive stats affect your survivability. Vitality increases your overall health, while endurance increases your stamina and poison resistances. The offensive stats directly influence what weapons you're able to wield and how much damage you're able to do with those weapons. Sounds simple enough at first, but there's a bit more to these 6 stats than meets the eye. Each stat can be leveled up to 99 points, but rarely do you ever want to bring a stat up to the max of 99. In Bloodborne, there are what are known as soft caps and hard caps. When you're leveling up, say, Vitality, for instance, you're not always going to get the same HP return from each individual point of Vitality. Between 26 and 30 Vitality, you get between 26 and 30 HP per point, but afterwards, the returns drop down between 21 and 22 HP per point. This is effectively a soft cap. It shouldn't discourage you from leveling up Vitality further, but it ought to have you questioning whether or not your level ups may be more beneficial elsewhere. Compare this to what happens when you try to go past a hard cap. Between 46 and 49 Vitality, you gain 15 to 18 HP per point, but past 50 Vitality, you only gain between 7 to 9 HP per point. Huge difference. These are also known as diminishing returns. They will have a hefty influence in how you make an efficient build. Furthermore, I heavily recommend that new players prioritize Vitality first until they feel comfortable enough to tank more than a handful of hits. Between 21 and 30 Vitality, you actually see your HP returns growing higher and higher before hitting the soft cap. Don't be afraid of missing out on damage in the early game for more health. Too many times have I encountered hosts who get killed in 3 hits or less. Stay healthy out there, kids, and eat your damn protein. This same cap logic can be applied to the rest of the stats. Endurance, remember, governs stamina and poison resistances. There's a soft cap for poison resistances at 16 endurance. The hard cap for those resistances start at 30. Meanwhile, stamina doesn't have a soft cap, but it most certainly has a hard cap at 40 endurance. What this means is that you should never have endurance above 40. Ever. Remember that. Personally, I recommend against bringing your endurance above 20. Again, first-time players, do your own thing. If you feel like you absolutely need 40, go right ahead. However, if you take into consideration how little stamina is spent while dashing and attacking, not to mention the fact that you can use Carol runes in the game to compensate for the low endurance, while your weapons themselves tend to KO players relatively quickly, that extra endurance is rarely needed. This lets you put points into more meaningful stats, but we'll be talking about build making in a quick bit. Strength, skill, blood tinge, and arcane all have similar soft caps and hard caps. They all have a soft cap at 25 and a solid hard cap at 50. Arcane is a special snowflake though. The hunter tools that you can find in Bloodborne continue to scale well above 70 arcane, all the way up to 99. I'd actually say that making a 99 arcane build isn't a terrible idea in the slightest. Don't just take my word for it. Reddit user SLJM8D made an entire cookbook of sorts that shows off the power of a 99 arc build. That link will be in the description. Though, what's recommended for newer players are the two stats, strength and skill. You're going to have the easiest time with these two. They grant you access to almost every weapon in the entire game to try out. It's the blood tinge and arcane builds that require a bit more experience and planning before you can get the most out of them. Side note, there is no respec in this game, and that's going to be a huge bummer for anyone looking to experiment with ease. You might not have known you'd done diddled yourself until you're already 100 levels in deep. This means two things. One, your starting origin matters when it comes to min-maxing for the meta. And because of that, two, I'm going to be putting links to both the website Mugenmonkey and a Google Spreadsheet AR calculator in the description of this video. These are handy tools that you can preview your builds with from the get-go. This way you have somewhat of an idea of what's coming before you end up spending dozens of hours to find out that something's not right after all your hard work. Save yourself the trouble. Now that we've talked about the individual stats, what happens when we bring them all together? If you want to play with other players, either through co-op or through PvP, then you will need to make builds centered around a blood level meta, or BL meta for short. And the remainder of this video is basing itself off of the well-established BL meta of 120. Why? Because when most people left Bloodborne in the dust all that while ago, a small community of players still kept it alive to this day, and they use the BL 120 meta. The reasons why they do this are twofold. One, the builds made for this are typically used for PvP. If you're not into PvP, then by all means continue leveling your character to your heart's content. Hell, even go all the way to 544, the max level. No one's stopping you. Well, actually, probably the only thing stopping you is the fact that your chances to find any random players to help or fight will be slim to none. Probably just none, really. And let's say that you do use this max level character as a cooperator to help a friend out with a password. Well, tough luck, because all of your stats and damage will be scaled down to the floor where your Aunt Darlene left her toenail clippings from the night before, so you'll most likely die to enemies in 3 to 2, maybe even 1 hit. Consider building around a modest level. It doesn't have to be 120, but it doesn't have to be 500 either. Again, this is all considering that you want to co-op or invade. It's all down to your preference. Number 2, there was a bit of a, how you say, debate when Bloodborne was first released about which meta the community ought to gravitate towards. Ouroboros showcased a blood level 100. Peve Peverson used a blood level 110, and Praise the Sun advocated for blood level 150. While each player had their own reasoning, blood level 120 is a great compromise when no one else can agree. 120s can match with 100s, 150s, and with anyone else in between. Whether or not these fights are fair ultimately boils down to the builds in question and the skill of the fighters involved. Blood gems have a huge role to play in Bloodborne, but let's put a pin in that topic for now. When you're deciding what build you want to make, you have to decide which stats you want to use and which stats you don't want to use. And we're talking about efficiency here. So that means the stats you want to use have to come as close to their hard cap as you can possibly push them, as long as you're adhering to a meta too. So when I hear players ask, what build should I make in Bloodborne? I think the real question that needs to be answered is, what kinds of builds are there in Bloodborne? Researching and experimenting several different builds myself, I was able to condense all of the weapons, firearms, hunter tools, all of your choices into 6 identifiable categories. And no, this is not me saying that there are only 6 builds in Bloodborne. There are dozens upon dozens of different ideas for builds, you know? But if you really look into how some of these builds work, you tend to see recognizable patterns with how the players leveled their stats. Let's bring those bad boys back up, shall we? Notice how there are 6 stats. Now you're getting an idea where I found those 6 categories from. And what I'm about to say ought to help you decide whether a certain build suits what you want for your playstyle. In the 6 categories, there are the big boys and girls, Dex users in denial, the most hated builds in the entire game, hentai apologists, literal tanks, and the builds that can't even run a 5K without walking for a good 5 minutes. That's strength, skill, blood tinge, arcane, vit gouge, and base endurance. Sound about right? No? Okay, let's break it down. The first 4 are self-explanatory. They require 50 points in their respective stat of choice. The weapons and tools that I place in these categories means that they can work off of that single stat with little to no investment in another offensive stat. Strength favor builds. The weapons that benefit from 50 strength are the Amygdalin Arm, Beast Claws, Beast Cutter, Hunter Axe, Kirk Hammer, and Whirligig Saw. Now these weapons do benefit from a little skill investment, and the Amygdalin Arm might appreciate a little arcane too, but it is not required to do so. 50 strength is the bare minimum to get these weapons toward their highest potential. As a strength build, you also have access to the OG cannon, church cannon, and Gatling gun. I don't think I need to be the one to tell you how useful these firearms can be in the right hands. Also, the Fist of Gratia is another solid addition for a strength build because it serves as a fast, offhand complement to your slower main hand weapons. It even has the ability to break hyper armor on certain enemies and straight up stagger bosses. I think it can also parry. Skill favor builds. Weapons that utilize 50 skill to great effectiveness are the Blade of Mercy, Burial Blade, Rakuyo, Rider Palash, Rifle Spear, and Threaded Cane. Leveling up skill also means that your visceral attacks will do more damage. Bosses like Lady Maria will become a cakewalk, and you could even one-shot some players from full health. Why FromSoft in all their great wisdom thought giving just one stat the ability to up visceral damage was a good idea is beyond me. Pure blood tinge builds really only benefit 2 weapons, the ever so infamous Chikage and Bloodletter. What makes them so infamous is their burst damage. That means these weapons have attacks that do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. Blood tinge builds also can use the Evelyn, the most spammable pistol in the entire game, all due to the fact that you can take sizable chunks of their health away from a range. Perhaps the only equalizer for players hoping to hop onto the blood tinge bandwagon is the fact that farming for high-level blood attack up gems is an incredibly brutal slog. Still, it isn't these players' fault that blood tinge is the bane of Satan. What were you thinking, Miyazaki? The last of these 4 is arcane. Now, if you remember that I said that arcane was a special snowflake, let me tell you why. The only weapon that organically scales off of arcane is the Cause Parasite, but this isn't the only weapon that an arcane build can use. Thanks to elemental blood gems, almost every other weapon in the game can be converted to work into your build. Equipping a weapon like the Saw Spear with fire blood gems can turn bosses like Vicar Amelia and Ludwig into pushovers. Let's not forget about the fact that Arcane has the privilege of having all the hunter tools at their disposal. The utility Arcane builds have makes them incredibly dangerous and unpredictable. However, they are similar to Bloodtinge in that getting a proper Arcane build off the ground is quite a hill to climb. But if you're willing to brave the hours and farm until you drop, Arcane will show its true potential to you. The last two categories I have are quite unique. Unique in the respect that most players wouldn't really have thought of making builds like these in the first place. You'd ask yourself, why didn't I do this all along? Vit Gouge. These are the builds that push past the hard cap of vitality, knowing fully well what they're doing. They put on the strongest health runes they have and care not for how their weapons scale, because they let their blood gems do all the work for them. The particular blood gems they use add flat damage increases to their weapons, similar to how raw infusions work in Dark Souls. Examples include the Logarius Wheel and Blade of Mercy. Once you've hit the base requirements of your weapons of choice, you can pump Vit and top it off with the right amount of endurance. Imagine a Blade of Mercy endlessly chasing after you while you seemingly can't get their health down low enough for them to back off. Yeah, it's something like that. How you work your Vit Gouge build of choice will also determine which firearms and tools you can bring alongside your main weapons. If you wanted to, you could even make a Forrest Gump build where you just run. Run away from your problems. Run away from your responsibilities. Run, Forrest, run! But can you run away from that nagging feeling of dread that you have to wake up the next morning? And this brings us to the final category of builds that you can come across in Bloodborne. What separates these builds from the rest is that one particular stat that you think you might need in the beginning, but end up not needing at all. See what I did there? These are what I like to call the base endurance builds. I'm sure you were wondering where the quality weapons were going to be on this list, and the fact of the matter is, they belong here. Weapons like the Beast Hunter Scythe, Ludwig's Holy Blade, Stake Driver, Saw Cleaver, Saw Spear, and my personal favorite, the Church Pick. In order to get the most out of these weapons, they require both 50 strength and 50 skill. The only way to accommodate that is by neglecting endurance altogether.
But wait! There's more!
Having base endurance doesn't just benefit 50-50 quality. It works with hybrid builds like Strength Arc. Strength Arc uses the Holy Moonlight Sword, Boom Hammer, Tonitrus, Logarius Wheel, and the Amygdalin Arm. Yeah, this guy again. And in order to get the most out of Simon's Bowblade, you need somewhere around 45 skill and 45 blood tinge. You can reasonably throw the Rider Palash and Rifle Spear into this category too. For the real daredevils out there, you can also combine Blood Tinge and Arcane. Sounds crazy, right? It is. You can have the best of both worlds. Insane burst damage from the Chikage, element-converted weapons that chew through bosses, and have the utility of all the hunter tools as the cherry on top. There is one huge caveat to using Blood Tinge and Arc at the same time though. If Arcane gem farming was pretty bad, and Blood Tinge gem farming was pretty freaking abysmal, now try mixing those two together and taking a drink. Of all these categories, base endurance might be the most off-putting for newer players. These builds require a lot of knowledge of the game beforehand, about farming, about what you want and what you can do. It also asks the player to make little to no mistakes when you're in the middle of a fight. You can't spam your attacks ad nauseum all that much anymore. But then again, why would you if you were already in the know?
Oh, hello?
Leveling up your stats is half of making a build in Bloodborne. If this were Dark Souls, that would be it. Just upgrade your weapons and armor and bam, you're set. But Bloodborne was FromSoft's risky step into a new direction. They didn't just make a Souls-like spin-off for kicks. They wanted to try something fresh with familiar-looking brushstrokes. That something new are in the Blood Gems and the Chalice dungeons. Blood Gems dictate how much real damage your weapons are going to do, and the best Blood Gems are locked behind the Chalice dungeons. You can get away with never touching a Chalice dungeon and instead do farming in the Old Hunters DLC. But if you are looking for the most efficient and diverse gems for your build, then you need to go deeper. You are required at the very least to beat 6 fixed chalices. If you want to blaze through these chalices, I recommend that you start the chalices after you've already completed the entire base game along with the DLC. The first 3 should be real easy to get through with the blood gems you acquired up to that point. It's once you hit the Loran and defiled chalices that things might become difficult again. Much more difficult, in fact. Get past those and the Great Thumerian Ill, then you can begin the farming. The biggest downside to the chalices is that they serve almost as a barrier to entry for build making. You can't just max out your build without going through these chalices too. Now I understand they're a time sink, for sure, I'm not denying that. For those who wish to go that extra length for damage, these are the hills you have to climb. Not only that, but you sometimes need to acquire lost and uncanny versions of the weapons you want to use. These different versions come with different gem slots than the original, leading to easier farming opportunities and greater overall damage output. I recommend that you hold off on spending blood rocks on a weapon until you're absolutely sure that it's the most efficient version of that weapon. I would also highly encourage for you to check out the Bloodborne-Wiki. That's the Bloodborne-Wiki to you. Not Vextra Life, not Wikia, this Bloodborne-Wiki. The entire site will have even more answers to your questions than what I'm able to give, especially when it comes to which gems might suit your particular playstyle. The next best thing I can do to aid in your struggle is to give you a tip. Save scum. That's right. Get yourself a thumb drive or get your PlayStation Plus save cloud ready and watch this. Just before you face a boss in a chalice, before you make that attempt to get that gem, use the beckoning bell and immediately silencing blink. This saves the game at the exact point that you rung the bell. Quit the game, then save the game data to either your stick drive or to the cloud. Load back into the game, go into that boss fog, kill that boss, and pray to RNGesus. If you don't get what you're looking for, load back that save and try again. This ought to help with some of the frustration that comes with the entire process. I'm also going to give you a list of glyphs that will point you in the right direction. Those links will be in the description. They'll show where you can find specific blood gems, where to find the lost and uncanny weapons, etc., etc. I will also say that physical attack up gems will be the most commonly needed gems for most of the builds in Bloodborne. Fortunately for you, they're probably the easiest farm to do in the entirety of the Chalice dungeons. From there though, farming elemental gems, blood attack up gems, abyssal gems, and so on will be a bit more tedious. And by a bit, I mean a lot. But persevere through the RNG like you would in any other loot-based game like Diablo, Destiny, or Monster Hunter, and you'll find the gems you're looking for. Or you could just lose your mind in the process. And that about wraps up how to make a build in Bloodborne. I hope you learned something from this entire exchange. It definitely was a doozy to put together because there was a lot to say. Also, don't take what I have said to be the unbreakable rule on how to make builds. You can decide how to make your own build however you want. I simply wanted to show players what some of the most efficient outcomes were. From there, you can plot your own course and make something that other people haven't seen before. Or you could just make another Chikage and Evelyn build. Whatever you choose, you're gonna need all the help you can get. Thank you so much for watching. If you genuinely enjoyed this video or learned something new, smash that motherfucking like button. If you have a unique build that wasn't mentioned in this video, go ahead and comment below. I'd love to see it. Blood gems, soul level, and all. Just go right ahead. I would also like to remind everyone that it is the 3rd month of 2018. Almost a quarter of the year has just gone by. And honestly, it doesn't feel like much time has passed at all. Don't let these days slip through your fingers. Going into the spring of 2018, remember what's important to you. And remember who is important to you. Remind those people that you care about them. And don't forget yourself that they care about you. Have yourselves a great day and a good night. And may the good blood guide your way. I'll see y'all next time.